I am sorry for your loss, but rent is due.
Sir, we just buried our parents.
But understanding does not pay rent.
There is something people don't tell you about sacrifice. It does not scream. It does not announce itself. It does not demand applause. It dies quietly. And this story begins with 4 children standing beside 2 graves. Rain was falling that evening. Not the kind that pours heavily and ends quickly. No, this rain lingered. It felt like the sky itself was grieving. And under that grey sky stood Amara, 17 years old, staring at the red earth that had just swallowed her parents. Behind her stood her siblings, Tunde, 14, Sade, 11, and little Kola, only 7. 4 children, no relatives in sight, no uncles stepping forward, no aunties offering comfort, just silence and the sound of soil hitting wood. That was the day Amara stopped being a child. But here is the part nobody knew, and I want you to pay attention carefully because this secret will matter later. Amara had dreams. She was the brightest student in her school. Her teachers used to say she would become a lawyer. She loved books. She loved the smell of new notebooks. She loved arguing debates and winning them. And she had just received admission into the university 2 weeks before her parents died. 2 weeks. But grief does not wait for your plans. The landlord came first, 3 days after the burial. He knocked on the door and said, "I am sorry for your loss." Not sounding sorry at all, but rent is due. That night, Amara did not sleep. She sat on the thin mattress in the dark and stared at the wall. Her siblings were asleep, hungry but exhausted from crying, and a small kerosene lamp flickered beside her. And that was the night she made her first sacrifice. The next morning, she wore her only neat dress and walked to the university, not to register, but to withdraw. Her lecturer tried to convince her, saying, "Amara, you can defer," and she smiled gently and replied, "I'll come back next year." But deep down, something inside her already knew she would never return. Instead, she found work, first washing dishes on a roadside buka, then cleaning houses, then selling vegetables in the market, waking up by 4 a.m., cooking for her siblings, preparing them for school, and then rushing to work. Every day, she told them the same thing. Your only job is to read. Don't worry about anything else. Tunde once asked her, "What about you?" And she laughed softly, saying, "I've read enough." But that was not true. At night, when everyone slept, she would open her old textbooks and trace the words with her fingers like someone touching a memory. Now, here is where the story shifts, because suffering alone was not enough. Money was still not enough. School fees kept increasing, uniforms tore, books were needed, Sade fell sick once, and the hospital bill almost threw them out of the house. That was when the suitors started coming. Amara was beautiful. Not the loud kind of beauty that demands attention. No, hers was quiet, gentle, the kind that made people look twice, and men noticed. And when they discovered she was alone, they noticed even more. The first man was older, a trader, who promised to help, saying, "You don't have to struggle like this. Be with me, I will take care of your siblings." And she refused. The second one offered school fees in exchange for friendship, and she refused again. But poverty is patient. It waits until your resistance weakens. One evening, she returned home and found Tunde sitting outside crying, whispering, "They said they will send me out of school tomorrow. We haven't paid." That night, Amara walked out. She did not tell anyone where she was going. She returned very late with money, and from that day, something in her changed. She started accepting help, quietly, silently, with conditions she never explained, and the school fees were always paid on time after that. The children never lacked again, but the laughter in her eyes began to fade. And here is the painful part. Her siblings noticed the change, but they never asked questions because children grow fast when comfort returns. Tunde entered university first, engineering, Sade followed in nursing, and Kola, he became the pride of the family, law school, just like Amara once dreamed. Whenever neighbors praised them, they would smile proudly and say, "Our sister tried. Tried, not sacrificed, not bled, just tried." And slowly, very slowly, embarrassment began to creep in. Amara still sold in the market, still dressed simply, still smelled of pepper and smoke from her cooking business. And the more educated they became, the more distant they grew. It did not happen in one day. It happened in little ways. Phone calls became shorter, visits became rare, they stopped bringing friends home. And one day, listen carefully, one day, Amara descended to surprise Tunde at his university. She wore her cleanest wrapper, she braided her hair neatly, she carried homemade food in a flask, and she waited at the gate. When Tunde saw her from afar, his smile disappeared and he walked up quickly asking, "Why are you here?" And she replied, "I brought you food." And he said, "You should have told me." And she laughed softly, "I wanted it to be a surprise." His friends were watching and he did not collect the flask, saying only, "I'm busy, next time don't just come." And that was the first crack in her heart. She stood there long after he walked away. The security man later told her visiting hours were over and she walked home alone. That night, she coughed for the first time, just a small cough, nothing serious. But pain does not always begin loudly. Sometimes it starts as a whisper. And my dear listener, that whisper would grow because what Amara did not know was that the seeds of abandonment had already been planted and the sickness inside her body was only just beginning. Let me tell you something about abandonment. It rarely begins with cruelty. It begins with shame, and shame is a quiet poison. After the day Amara stood at Tunde's university gate holding a flask that was never collected, something changed inside her. Not loudly, not dramatically, just slightly, like a crack forming in glass. She did not confront him, she did not cry in front of anyone. She went home, reheated the food and ate it alone. But that night, her cough returned, and this time it lasted longer, and she pressed her chest and told herself it was just stress. After all, she had no time to be sick. Sade called the next weekend, her voice sounding different, polished, refined, saying, "Big sis, I might not come home this month. I have group projects." And Amara replied gently, "That's fine. Read your books. Make me proud." There was a pause, and then Sade said softly, "Please don't come to my school like you did to Tunde." And the words were soft, but they cut. Amara swallowed slowly, asking, "Did he tell you?" And Sade replied, "No, I just think, things are different now." Different. Such a simple word, such a dangerous one. Amara ended the call politely. She sat still for a long time afterwards, staring at the wall. Outside, the evening market noise continued as usual. Women shouting prices, children running, radios playing music. Life was moving, but something inside her was standing still. Weeks passed, then months. The children came home less frequently, and when they did, they stayed on their phones. They complained about the neighborhood, Tunde muttering once, "This place is too local," and Amara laughing softly, "It has always been local," and he replied, "Yes, but now things are different." Different again. Kola, the youngest, was the only one who still hugged her freely, but even he had started correcting her English sometimes, saying, "It's not pronounced like that, sis," and she would smile and say, "Teach me then." But gradually, even Kola began to change, because education gave them confidence, but it also gave them pride, and pride does not remember hunger. One evening, Amara overheard something she was never meant to hear. Tunde was outside speaking on the phone, saying casually, "Yes, my parents died when I was young. I mostly trained myself. It was tough." And Amara froze inside the kitchen, holding the spoon, as something inside her broke quietly. Mostly trained himself. That night, her cough worsened, and this time there was blood. Not much, just a stain, and she washed it quickly before anyone saw. Hospital? With what money? All the savings were going toward Kola's law textbooks, and she convinced herself it was nothing serious. Pain became her companion. Fatigue followed, but she kept working. Now listen carefully, because this is where the silence becomes heavier. Sade graduated first. There was a ceremony, and Amara ironed her best blouse for the occasion, borrowed transport money from a neighbor, and traveled early so she would not miss it. And when she arrived, she called Sade saying, "I'm outside the gate." There was a long silence, and Sade asked, "You came?" And Amara said, "Yes." And another pause followed before Sade said, I'm already with my friends." And Amara replied, "That's fine, I'll wait." But Sade said, "You don't have to, it's crowded." And Amara said quietly, "I don't mind." 20 minutes later, a message came instead of a call. "Something urgent came up, I'll see you later." Amara stood outside the gate for 2 hours, watching parents take pictures with their children, watching mothers adjust gowns proudly, watching fathers hug their daughters. She smiled for them, then she went home. She did not tell anyone she had gone. That evening, the cough became violent, her chest burned like fire, and still she kept quiet, because what is pain compared to the success of your children? That is what she told herself. But success without gratitude is a dangerous thing. And here is the truth no one saw. The siblings were not evil. They were ashamed of the market smell, ashamed of the rumors they had started hearing, because whispers had begun spreading in the community about how Amara got money in the early years. And when young, educated minds hear such whispers, they begin to judge. Tunde confronted her once, saying, "People are saying things." And Amara looked at him calmly, replying, "People always say things." But he pressed further. Did you have to do certain things for money?" And she did not answer immediately. She only asked one question. "Did you finish your school fees?" He looked away, saying, "That's not the point." And she smiled gently. "It is exactly the point." And he never asked again. But respect began fading and distance widened. Kola entered law school and became the family's final pride. Relatives who had ignored them years ago suddenly reappeared, saying, "Amara, you did well." And she would smile and nod. But none of them asked how she was sleeping at night. None noticed how thin she had become. None saw how she held her chest when she thought no one was looking. Then one day, she tried visiting Kola at school. And this time, she did not wait outside. She called first. But his voice sounded uneasy, saying, "I'm busy, sis, maybe next week." And she said, "I'm already on the bus." And silence followed before he said, "I have a moot court session." And she replied, "I'll just see you for 5 minutes." But he said, "It's not a good time." She ended the call slowly, and for the first time, she did not cry. She just sat on that moving bus and stared through the window, and something inside her was finally understanding. The sacrifice was complete. They no longer needed her. And sometimes when people no longer need you, they convince themselves they never did. That night, the blood in her cough increased. She held a cloth to her mouth and whispered something no one heard. "It's okay." But my dear listener, it was not okay, because sickness does not only grow in the body, it grows in the heart. And the most dangerous pain is the one endured in silence. There are 2 kinds of pain in this world: the pain of hunger and the pain of being misunderstood. Amara has survived hunger, but misunderstanding, that one began to suffocate her. It started as whispers in the market. Women who once greeted her warmly began lowering their voices when she passed. Men who used to respect her started smiling in a way that made her uncomfortable. And one of them said one afternoon, "Strong woman, you really did what you had to do." And the way he said it made her stomach tighten. She did not respond. She had learned long ago that silence protects dignity, but silence also allows rumors to grow. One evening, as she packed her goods, she overheard 2 young girls talking nearby. One saying, "Isn't she the one that used men to train her siblings?" And the other replying, "Yes, that's why her brothers don't bring her around." Amara's hands froze. She did not turn. She did not defend herself. She simply finished packing and walked home slowly, each step heavier than the last. Now listen carefully, because this is where the story deepens. The siblings were not blind to these rumors. They heard them too, at school, at gatherings, even from distant relatives who suddenly remembered they existed. And one uncle, who never contributed a single coin to their survival, said boldly during a family meeting, "It's unfortunate the children had to grow up under questionable support." Questionable support? But no one questioned the degrees hanging proudly on their walls. No one questioned the fees that were paid in full. No one questioned the nights Amara didn't eat. Tunde began avoiding family gatherings entirely. Sade stopped answering unknown numbers, and Kola became defensive whenever Amara's name was mentioned, saying sharply, "Let's not talk about the past." The past? As if it were something shameful. One Sunday afternoon, Tunde came home unexpectedly, looking serious, older, hardened, and said carefully, "Sis, people are talking too much." And Amara replied softly, "People have always talked." But he pressed on, "This is different. My company is considering me for a promotion, but they check background, they check family reputation. I think maybe it would be better if you stayed low for a while."
"Stayed low?" she asked gently. And he said, "Just don't show up at events. Don't visit my office. Let's just keep things simple." Keep things simple. As though she were a complication. Amara nodded slowly, saying, "If that will help you." And he looked relieved. Relieved, not guilty, relieved. And that night, she coughed again, harder, and this time she had to sit down because the room spun around her. Her body was weakening, but she told no one, because Amara had made a quiet promise years ago at her parents' graves: "I will not be a burden." And she intended to keep that promise, even if it killed her. Weeks later, Sade announced her engagement. The news came through a group message. No call, no visit, just pictures. Beautiful pictures. A ring sparkling under soft lights, and the caption read, "Congratulations to me." Amara stared at the photo for a long time, then typed, "I am proud of you." The wedding planning began immediately. Venues, guest lists, catering, and Amara waited for her invitation, but it never came. And when she finally asked gently, Sade hesitated, saying, "It's going to be small and classy." And Amara replied, "I understand." But Sade added, "We don't want unnecessary attention." And Amara nodded slowly, even though Sade could not see her through the phone, and said quietly, "I won't disturb you." But later that evening, Kola called, his voice carrying discomfort, saying, "Sis, don't misunderstand. It's just that some of the groom's family have heard things. They are very particular. It's better if you don't attend." There it was, clear, cold, final. For the first time in years, Amara felt something stronger than pain. And it wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. She was no longer their foundation. She had become their embarrassment. She ended the call quietly, then walked to the small wooden box under her bed. And inside it were old letters: her university admission letter, Tunde's first school receipt, Sade's hospital bill from when she almost died of malaria, Kola's law entrance acceptance letter, and she touched each one slowly, as if saying goodbye. Outside, life continued as usual, but inside that small room, something shifted permanently. The cough now came with sharp chest pain. Sometimes she struggled to breathe. Sometimes she held the wall to steady herself. And still she refused hospital treatment, because deep down she believed her role was finished. And when people believe their purpose is complete, they stop fighting. Now, here is the suspense you must hold on to. There was something none of the siblings knew, something Amara had hidden carefully, a secret that would not reveal itself yet, but when it does, it will change everything they think they know. For now, all they saw was a market woman with rumors attached to her name. They did not see the nights she walked alone so they could sleep peacefully. They did not see the opportunities she buried so they could rise. They did not see the sickness slowly eating her lungs. And so the wedding date was fixed. And Amara, she stayed home, alone. There is a special kind of loneliness that visits a person on the day they realize they no longer belong. It does not shout, it settles. The morning of Sade's wedding arrived bright and beautiful. The sun rose confidently as though it had been personally invited to the celebration. The city buzzed with movement, makeup artists rushed, tailors made last-minute adjustments, cameras flashed in hotel rooms. And in a small, quiet house at the edge of town, Amara woke up slowly.
She had barely slept. The cough had kept her awake through the night. Her chest felt tight, like invisible fingers were pressing against her lungs. And when she tried to sit up, dizziness washed over her. For a moment, she considered something she had refused to consider for months: hospital. But she shook her head gently and whispered to herself, after today, as if today was something she needed to survive. She walked to the basin and splashed water on her face, and in the cracked mirror hanging beside the window, she barely recognized herself. Her cheeks had sunk, her eyes looked tired, yet there was something else in them. Peace. Not happiness, not even acceptance, just peace. She cooked rice and stew that morning, a small portion, out of habit, even though there was no one coming home that evening. As she stirred the pot, music floated through the air from a neighbor's radio, a wedding song, joyful, vibrant, and she paused, closed her eyes, and allowed herself one dangerous thought. What would it have felt like to attend? To sit among guests and watch the little girl she once carried on her back walk down the aisle, to adjust Sade's veil the way their mother would have, to take pictures together. But imagination can be cruel, so she opened her eyes quickly and returned to staring. Now listen carefully, because something important happened that afternoon. Around 2 p.m., Amara's phone vibrated, and it was a message from an unknown number. And when she opened it, it was a picture. Sade in her white gown, radiant, smiling, and the caption read, "She said not to send this, but I thought you should see your hard work." No name, just that sentence, your hard work. Amara stared at the image for a long time, her fingers trembling slightly, and she zoomed in on Sade's face. That was the same child who once clung to her wrapper, crying after their parents died. The same girl who used to say, "When I grow up, I will buy you a big house." Tears filled Amara's eyes, but she did not let them fall. Instead, she whispered softly, "Be happy," then locked her phone. Evening came. The city glowed with celebration. Cars moved in long lines. Guests laughed loudly. Social media filled with videos of the wedding, and Amara did not open any of them. Instead, she stepped outside and sat on the wooden bench in front of her house. The air was cool, and for a moment, she felt calm. Then the cough came, violent, unforgiving, and she bent forward, holding her chest. This time, the blood was not a small stain. It was more. Her breathing became shallow, her vision blurred, and there was no one there to notice, no one to panic, no one to rush her to safety. After a few minutes, it passed. She leaned back against the wall slowly, her body feeling weaker than ever before. And for the first time, fear crept in. Not fear of death, fear of dying unnoticed. She laughed softly at the thought. How ironic. A woman who gave her entire youth to keep others alive, now sitting alone on a bench fighting for breath. Night deepened. Music from distant celebrations echoed faintly. She went inside and lay on her bed, her body aching, her lungs burning, her heart feeling strangely light, as if it had finally stopped expecting anything. Now, here's something the siblings did not know. Earlier that same day, at the wedding reception, an elderly woman from the groom's side had asked a simple question. Where is the sister who trained her? The room had gone quiet, and Sade had forced a smile, saying she couldn't make it. And the old woman asked, why? And Sade replied, she was busy. And the old woman studied her carefully before saying, busy people create time for the ones who built them. The sentence lingered, but the music grew louder, and the moment passed. By midnight, Amara's breathing had grown labored. She tried sitting up, but the room spun. She reached for her phone, paused, and placed it back down. She would not call them. She had promised herself, I will not be a burden. Hours later, as the city slept, Amara lay staring at the ceiling, and memories played gently in her mind. 4 children, rain at a graveside, an university admission letter, a flask of food refused at a gate, a wedding she watched through someone else's phone, and then silence. But she was not gone, not yet. Morning would come, and with it, something unexpected. Morning did not arrive gently. It forced itself into the room through the cracked window, dragging light across the bare walls, across the small wooden table, across the body lying still on the bed. Amara had not slept. Every breath she took during the night felt borrowed, and by dawn, even breathing had become work. She tried to sit up, but her body refused. Her chest felt like it was filled with stones. For the first time in years, she whispered a prayer for herself. Not for Tunde's promotion, not for Sade's marriage, not for Kola's exams, but for herself. God, if it is time, let it be peaceful. Hours passed. Outside, neighbors moved about their routines, women swept compounds, children prepared for school. Life carried on, unaware that in one small room, a battle was quietly ending. Around 10 a.m., her phone vibrated. She stared at it weakly. It was Kola. She let it ring once, twice, and on the third ring, she answered. Sis? His voice sounded rushed. I was thinking, maybe I'll come by this weekend. I haven't seen you in a while. And she replied with a faint smile in her voice. You are busy. And he said, I can make time. She coughed before responding, and the sound startled him. Are you okay? He asked, and she said quickly, It's nothing, just small cough. And he replied, You should check it. And she said, I will. There was a pause, and for a brief second, something almost broke through his voice. Guilt. But pride is a stubborn wall. And he said, All right, I'll call you later. And she whispered gently, Read your books. And the call ended. She stared at the ceiling again. If he had asked one more question, if he had insisted, but he didn't. Now, listen carefully, because what happened next will follow them for the rest of their lives. By noon, her breathing became erratic. She tried standing, but her legs trembled violently. She held onto the wall and managed 3 steps before collapsing back onto the bed. Her vision darkened at the edges. Her thoughts slowed. And in that quiet space between pain and surrender, she remembered something. Under the bed, the wooden box. With the last strength she had, she slid down slowly and pulled it out. Inside were documents carefully arranged, receipts, letters, and something new, an envelope none of the siblings had ever seen. And she held it to her chest briefly, then placed it back inside. And tears finally escaped her eyes. Not tears of regret, but tears of release. By evening, the coughing had stopped. Not because she was better, but because her body no longer had the strength to fight. The neighbors did not notice anything unusual. Amara was quiet by nature. She did not attract attention. Night came again, but this time there was no long battle. Only shallow breaths, and then stillness. No dramatic last words, no audience, no final embrace, just silence. The next morning, it was the woman from the next compound who noticed, saying, She hasn't come out. And by afternoon, concern grew. By evening, the door was forced open, and there she was, lying peacefully as though asleep. The news traveled fast. Phones began ringing. First Tunde, then Sade, then Kola. What do you mean she's gone? She was fine. She didn't say anything. They arrived separately, not together. Tunde stood near the doorway, staring at her body as though expecting her to sit up and correct the misunderstanding. Sade began crying loudly, and Kola said nothing at all. He simply stood frozen. On the small table beside her bed sat a glass of water, untouched, and under the bed, the wooden box, but no one looked there yet. Relatives who once kept distance now filled the compound. Voices rose, speculations began. She must have been sick. Why didn't she go to hospital? And then the question that lingered heavier than all the others. Didn't the children take care of her? Tunde's jaw tightened. Sade cried harder, and Kola finally stepped forward and touched her hand. It was cold, and in that moment something pierced through him. Not rumor, not pride, but truth. He had been planning to visit, but planning is not presence. Now, listen carefully because this is where the story turns. While preparing her body, the neighbor found the wooden box and handed it to Kola, saying, "I think this belongs to you people." And he held it carefully. It felt heavier than it should have, but he did not open it, not yet. They were too busy organizing burial arrangements, too busy answering questions, too busy explaining to outsiders what they had never explained to themselves, how the woman who built them died alone. That night, after everyone left, the three siblings sat in that same small room for the first time in years, together, in silence. The air felt different, empty. And beneath the bed where Amara once kept her secrets, something waited. And when they finally opened that box, nothing will ever be the same again. The mourners had left. The compound was quiet. The plastic chairs were stacked against the wall. The food coolers were covered, and only the three siblings remained inside the small room that once held their entire childhood. Tunde sat on the wooden chair near the window. Sade sat on the edge of the bed. Kola stood near the wall, and no one spoke, because when words finally come, they have to pass through guilt first. It was Kola who looked under the bed, not intentionally. His eyes were just searching for something to focus on, and that was when he saw it, the wooden box, old, worn, familiar, and he pulled it out slowly. "This was always here," Sade whispered, and Amara had never hidden it. She simply never opened it in front of them. And Kola placed the box on the bed, and for a moment none of them touched it because somehow they all felt it. Whatever was inside would not be light. Tunde finally spoke. "Open it." Kola lifted the lid carefully, and the first thing they saw were receipts, old school receipts. Tunde's secondary school tuition fully paid. Sade's hospital bill from when malaria almost took her life at 13, fully paid. Kola's law school acceptance fee, fully paid. And there were dozens of them, organized by year, by name, by date. Sade's hands began to shake, asking, "She kept all this?" And Kola said nothing. Underneath the receipts were letters, and Tunde picked up the first one. It was addressed to a university, and when he opened it slowly, it was Amara's admission letter, dated the same year their parents died, with a note attached in her handwriting that read, "I will come back for this." The room felt smaller suddenly, and Sade whispered, "She got admission?" And Tunde said faintly, "Yes." And Sade asked, "She never told us?" And the answer was no, she never did, because she chose them instead. Under the admission letter was something else, medical papers, and Kola picked them up, his breath catching in his throat. Diagnosis reports, pulmonary tuberculosis, advanced stage, recommended treatment, immediate hospitalization, and the date of diagnosis, 2 years ago. 2 years. She knew, said his voice broke. She knew she was sick. And there were prescriptions attached, unpurchased, follow-up appointments missed. And Tunde's voice came out hoarse. Why didn't she tell us? But even as he asked, he already knew. Because telling them would mean becoming a burden, and she had promised herself she would never be one. Then Kola noticed the envelope at the bottom, thicker than the rest, sealed, with their names written on it, all three. And his hands trembled as he opened it, and inside was a letter, and he began to read aloud. "My dear stubborn children." Sade covered her mouth. Tunde stared at the floor, and Kola continued. "If you are reading this, then I have finally rested. Do not cry too much. I am not angry. I am not disappointed. I understand more than you think." The words were calm, gentle. "I heard the rumors too. I saw the distance. I know you felt ashamed sometimes. That is okay. The world is loud and young hearts are easily influenced." Sade broke down. Tunde pressed his palms against his eyes, and Kola forced himself to keep reading. "I made choices I knew you would not understand. Some were hard, some were painful, but every single one was mine. I do not regret them." There was a pause in the letter, and then the line that shattered them completely. "I would rather be misunderstood and see you succeed than be respected and watch you suffer." Silence filled the room, heavy, crushing. I did not treat my illness because your future was more important than my comfort. Please do not blame yourselves. Just promise me one thing. Kola's voice cracked. Take care of each other and never be ashamed of where you came from. At the bottom of the letter was one final sentence. I never stopped being proud of you. The paper slipped from Kola's hands. No one moved, because there are moments when regret is not loud, it is suffocating. 2 years she had been dying slowly while they were building careers, while they were avoiding her visits, while they were telling people they trained themselves. Sade fell to her knees saying, she came to my graduation. And Tunde whispered, I told her to stay low. And Kola sat on the floor. I told her I was busy. The truth did not scream at them. It settled, like dust after destruction. Now listen carefully, because the twist is not that she sacrificed. The twist is that she never resented them, and that kind of love is rare and unbearable once you lose it. Outside, the night remained calm, unaware that inside that room, 3 successful adults had just realized they were once carried by someone who died alone, protecting their pride. And this realization was only the beginning. The burial was simple, too simple for a woman who had carried 3 destinies on her back. There were no grand speeches, no long tributes, just murmurs of, she tried her best. Tried, that word again. The same word they had used when she was alive, and now it sounded like an insult. The grave was covered before sunset, the crowd dispersed, and for the first time since childhood, the 3 siblings stood alone again, just like that rainy day years ago. Only this time, the person in the ground was not their parents, it was their shield. The days that followed felt unnatural. Tunde returned to his office, but his focus shattered easily. And during meetings, he would suddenly remember the flask of food at the university gate, the way she had smiled, the way he had walked away. He began declining invitations to corporate dinners. Success felt different now. He stopped telling people he trained himself. And the first time someone praised his self-made journey after her burial, he corrected them, saying, my sister built me, his voice shaking when he said it. And for the first time, he did not feel ashamed. Sade's marriage changed too. The house that once felt glamorous now felt empty, and one evening, while arranging her wedding photos, she found the image that had been anonymously sent to Amara, and she stared at her own smiling face in the picture. How happy she looked, how unaware she was. She remembered the elderly woman at the wedding who had asked, where is the sister who trained her? And that question now echoed endlessly, and Sade began volunteering quietly at a women's shelter. No announcement, no social media, just service, because guilt, when processed correctly, can become growth. But Kola carried it the hardest. He read the letter every night, over and over, and the words, I would rather be misunderstood and see you succeed, refused to leave him. One evening, he returned to the old house alone, sat on the wooden bench outside where Amara once sat during Sade's wedding night, imagined her there, breathing with difficulty, alone, and something inside him broke completely. He cried openly, not quietly, not politely, openly, because strength is sometimes admitting you failed someone who loved you. 3 months after her burial, the siblings gathered again, but this time it was intentional, not for mourning, but for decision, because they had discovered something else in that wooden box earlier, something they had overlooked in their shock. Amara had been saving money, small amounts, over years, hidden carefully, and it was not for herself. It was labeled simply for another child. She had planned to sponsor an orphan, even while dying, even while being abandoned, even while misunderstood. And silence filled the room when they realized it. She never stopped being who she was, Sade whispered. And that day, they made a promise. They created a foundation in her name, not for publicity, not for reputation repair, but because they finally understood her heart. The Amara Initiative, a small program to support orphaned girls who had to drop out of school. The first girl they sponsored was 17, bright, admitted into university on the verge of dropping out, just like Amara once was. And when they handed her the acceptance payment receipt, Kola felt something shift inside him. It did not erase the regret, nothing could, but it honored her. Years passed, their careers continued, their families grew, but they never again hid where they came from. And at every major event, they told her story, not the rumors, not the whispers, the truth, saying she gave up everything for us. And each time they said it, their voices softened, because love like that is rare, and losing it teaches a lesson no success ever can. Now let me ask you something. How many Amaras are alive today, sacrificing silently, misunderstood, uncelebrated, still loving anyway? And how many of us are too busy building our futures to check on the person who built us? If this story touched you even a little, pause for a moment. Think of someone who sacrificed for you. Have you called them lately? Have you thanked them? Or are you assuming there will always be another tomorrow? Because sometimes regret arrives and tomorrow never does. If you felt this chapter in your heart, comment below, I will not forget, and tell me, who is your Amara? Let's honor them while they are still here. If you love deeply emotional stories like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Floral Tales, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss the next powerful story. Because here at Floral Tales, we tell the stories people live but rarely talk about. And remember, appreciate them now, not when you are standing beside their grave.